My FPL Game Week 5 team selection after a horror start and an even worse Game Week 4. We're going to do our best, potentially playing a chip this week, although I'm not fully decided. I've got one transfer. The wildcard feels like it's looming. We're going to discuss all of that, how my team is lining up for this week, any potential transfers, who to captain as Mo Salah hasn't been fantastic, and it is the early kickoff. And we'll do some future planning around Game Week 5, 6, 7, and 8 at the end as well. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new to the channel. And before we look at Game Week 5, one final time, let's review how we got on in Game Week 4. It was an absolute horror show. I took a -4 to bench Chris Wood and to bring in Senesi and bring in Paqueta as well. And it didn't really pay off. Now, Chris Wood, when he went off before the 60th minute, I thought, well, actually, this could work out quite well because Agbadu went away to a Newcastle team. Senesi looked like a slightly better option. And of course, I had Lucas Paqueta still to play as part of that -4. But unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. I basically broke even with the hit. So -4 points down. I still don't mind it going forward as I sold Ismail Assar, who's likely to be dropping in price. I like Senesi for the long term and get him before all the price rises, which are likely to come, particularly with the amount of wildcards which are being planned on being played over the next couple of weeks by a lot of people. But it was a pretty disaster game week. A late Mo Salah penalty got me some nice points, which without them, it would have been a disaster. João Pedro remains the one good thing I did in my Game Week 1 team. And Anderson. I picked him in Game Week 1, and you're wondering why he's got the sort of gold background. And it is the week that the new FIFA is launching for anyone who's playing that. And it's a sort of team of the week style thing that I might start including in my videos, that one player every week gets the sort of star. And it is Anderson this week with his 10-pointer. So I got 58 points with a -4. So 54 points overall. My safety score was 66. So massively off anything that could be considered a green arrow. 3.2 million down to 4.8 million with the -4. Horror game week. Let's move forward because I want to forget about this and forget about the start of the season as soon as I possibly can. So going straight in to look at my team for Game Week 5, I don't really plan on making a transfer this week. I think rolling, as I spoke about in my transfer targets video yesterday, for a lot of people is going to be the best and probably most sensible thing to do this week. And it's probably where I'm at, despite the fact that I still hold double Aston Villa in my team. I've got a few other players like Bruno's not performing. And we'll talk about my future plans with all of those players in the future planning section, which I'll do at the end of this. I do sometimes throughout these videos if I think there's more to talk about, not just this week. And we'll do that in a moment. Sanchez is in goal. Him versus Dubravka is actually quite close. But let's start off by actually talking about the bench and talking about the bench boost. So the 4 players that I've got on my bench now, after all the comments I had on Twitter and all the comments that I had on YouTube, is Dubravka, Senesi, Pedro Porro, and Reinders. Now, I also had lots of questions asking, Harry, why does it matter who's on your bench if you're going to play the bench boost? It doesn't. It doesn't impact the amount of points I'm going to get. But it's interesting to have the correct players on your bench to work out whether the chip was successful if you do play it, but also if it's definitely worth playing it before you go and activate it. And Dubravka, Senesi, Porro, Reinders is probably the most realistic bench that I've got. I do think Senesi and Porro are not bad options, but Senesi goes up against a Newcastle team. Now, they do play Barcelona in the Champions League on Thursday. Pedro Porro goes away to a Brighton team, and of course, Porro played Champions League football on Tuesday evening. Reinders goes up against Manchester City, and Dubravka plays a Nottingham Forest team, of which I've got 2 in my starting 11. I still think I'm likely to play the bench boost, but when I set it up like this, I'm not 100% certain that it is as good as maybe as I first thought it would be. Where do I expect? I need 1 return from it, and there probably is enough on that bench in order to get a return, but I would expect Forest to probably score against Burnley, despite Burnley being quite good defensively, particularly at home, as we saw against Liverpool. Senesi probably gets some DEFCONs, and maybe that fatigue for Newcastle from Thursday night to the weekend turnaround will be enough, and we could get a clean sheet there. Pedro Porro has been pretty good, but we did see in the transfer targets that Spurs were the biggest overperformers in terms of defensive clean sheets so far this season. And then Reinders plays away at Arsenal. So I like it, and I think it's probably worth just getting it out of the way, but I would be interested to know if you would bench boost with that 4 on your bench. But let's get into the starting 11. Sanchez, as I said, is going to be in goal away at Man United. Him versus Dubravka is actually quite close. And we have had some quotes from Maresca before the Champions League game that said there will be rotation between the goalkeepers. I don't think it will be United. I actually don't think it will be until at least game week 9. But from game week 9 to about game week 16, when the Chelsea fixtures look a little bit better, I do think there's a chance that Jorgensen gets some minutes. So I put Sanchez in the wildcard draft I put out yesterday. But if I'm wildcarding in game week 6 or game week 8, I probably is enough for me to change and go for either a Donnarumma, a Vicario, or a David Raya, most likely, rather than going with Sanchez. You, of course, do have a 4 million option into Dubravka on the bench. So if you still wanted to go for Sanchez, I don't think it's particularly a problem, and I'm not worried about it in the short term. In terms of the other starting defenders, so Senesi and Porro on the bench, Williams of Nottingham Forest, we've got Anderson of Fulham and Agbadu of Wolves as my 3 starting options. Anderson and Agbadu both at home. Now, there is a few Wolves fans who don't think Agbadu has been good enough to keep his place. I'd be surprised if he loses his place this early on, given he was very good for them last season. Anderson looks great for DEFCON. It's a pretty okay fixture at home to Brentford. And then Williams goes away to a Burnley side who've actually looked good and did create a couple of chances against Liverpool, but still pretty decent fixture. Let's hope that they don't go full Ange ball just yet and they can keep a clean sheet in either game week 5 or game week 6. Into my midfield, Mo Salah is in, Bruno Fernandes, Lucas Paqueta, and Morgan Rogers. Salah, now, I put in one of my videos, I think in my short for the wildcard draft, that Salah has been disappointing. And yes, he scored twice this season and got an assist, but outside of the late sort of penalties and the assist that he's got, he has been a little bit disappointing. It is the early kickoff. Now, I'm definitely not going to sell Mo Salah, but I am considering what I'm going to do with him from game week 6 onwards, and I do think I'm likely to sell him. He just doesn't feel the focal point and the centre of that Liverpool team and the Liverpool attack compared to what they used to. When they were chasing a goal, how many times was Mo Salah the one to bail them out and they would look for him? And I just don't think we're seeing that quite so much anymore. And of course, I need Erling Haaland in my team, and I think Salah out to get the money is the most likely situation for me. Bruno Fernandes, now he has Chelsea, Brentford, Sunderland in the next 3. I do like some replacements for him. I'm not really sure he's worth the money, and I just am not enjoying watching Manchester United play football at the moment. So he is likely to go at some point, whether it's in game week 6 wildcard or game week 8 wildcard. We'll talk about that, but I'm not going to sell him this week, particularly because Chelsea go away to Bayern Munich midweek. Then it's Lucas Paqueta. He goes against a Crystal Palace team who've looked really, really strong. Now, they are likely still be without Wharton and likely to still be without Ismail Assar in that fixture, but I would expect Crystal Palace to win. Maybe West Ham brings some of what they brought in the last half an hour against Nottingham Forest, but he doesn't look like the best buy at the moment. Not sure how long Graham Potter will still be in charge there, so maybe he'll get a bit of a new manager bounce soon, but it won't be this week. And then it's Morgan Rogers, along with Ollie Watkins in my forward line. Now, they didn't start for Aston Villa in the Cup on Tuesday evening, but Villa did get over the goal score. They did score in that game. It was Harvey Elliott, but they still lost and still created very little chances. It is Sunderland away, which on paper looks all right, but Sunderland have been pretty good so far this season and particularly good at home. And we saw that with some of the data that we looked at in the transfer targets video yesterday. Sunderland's underlying defensive data has actually been quite strong. Rogers to Semenyo, Watkins to Gyökeres are transfers I would love to do, but I just don't think they're worth it for the fixtures they've got this week. Now, Semenyo might end up outscoring Rogers, but if I'm going to wildcard in game week 6, I'm going to buy Semenyo regardless in game week 6, I think, and we'll talk about that. So I'm not sure it's worth doing it this week in case I look to wildcard next week and get Semenyo in. So I'm going to give Rogers and Watkins one more week. I know it sounds crazy. I know they've been incredibly frustrating, but Sunderland away, it's all right. And I know that Semenyo goes up against a team in Newcastle have looked good defensively. Their defensive data, if you look at this table on the right-hand side, has looked pretty strong. I think they're right at the top, Newcastle. And of course, Arsenal are right up there and Manchester City are pretty good. So going to the likes of Haaland or Gyökeres this week. Gyökeres' minutes have been a little bit interesting. He's played 65 and 67 in the Champions League and the Premier League. He'll of course start against Manchester City, but those early subs are definitely slightly more concerning than I thought they'd be. Elsewhere up front, we've got João Pedro, who continues to bail me out. He is playing a lot of minutes, but Chelsea play Lincoln in the Cup next midweek, so I expect him, along with Caicedo, along with Cole Palmer, a lot of the key players to get a rest in that one. And that's when I think Sanchez won't start, so I don't worry about Sanchez in the Premier League. And then we've got Chris Wood. Fingers crossed he plays more minutes than he did last week. They, of course, do play in the Cup between now and in game week 5. So let's see how many minutes he gets there. Hopefully he doesn't start in the Cup against Swansea because I need a lot of minutes from him against Burnley. In terms of captaincy, despite me saying Mo Salah's not looked great, he's had a lot of late returns. He does have the captaincy armband. Now, it is the early kickoff. It is the 12:30 match. So it is the Merseyside derby, and they do play a big Champions League game, but after time recording before game week 5, which does concern me a little bit. And Everton have been pretty good defensively, but I don't see anyone else in my lineup that's a standout captaincy option. So Mo Salah is likely to leave for me in game week 6, but he does have the armband for me in game week 5. And currently Chris Wood has the vice captaincy, although it probably will end up on João Pedro, depending on how Chelsea get on in the Champions League. So 3-4-3, that is how my lineup is looking, with Salah captain and Chris Wood vice captain. I'm just dwindling a little bit on whether I think the bench boost is definitely worth it. Now, after a difficult start to the season, I do wonder about just playing the bench boost to get a few extra points in the bank. But it doesn't matter whether you play the bench boost now or in the bench boost in game week 18. Where you are at the end of the season is all that really matters. And I continue to tell myself that, sitting at 4.8 million after the first few weeks. But I'm not guaranteeing I'm going to play it. I still think I will, because I think there's enough on that bench to probably get myself a return, get to that 10, 15 point mark. But I wouldn't be completely surprised if they all blanked and I got sort of 8, 9, which wouldn't be the end of the world. But let me know in the comments if you would bench boost that. I'm almost certain I'm going to roll my transfer this week and we'll bring 2 into game week 6. So I do want to do a bit of future planning, because I've spoken at the beginning of the week and again now that the wildcard is likely to be played. I don't think I can get to game week 13 without the wildcard, but I'm not saying I definitely need it in game week 6, and we'll talk about why now. Game week 6, game week 7, and game week 8 look like the opportunities for me to potentially play my wildcard. Now, the reason I'm not certain of it is if I roll my transfer going into game week 6, I have 2 planned transfers, and it is around buying Erling Haaland. And it's either Chris Wood or it's either Ollie Watkins that will leave my team. Watkins is Fulham at home, followed by Burnley at home, whereas Chris Wood has Sunderland at home. And it will depend a little bit on what happens in game week 5 between Wood and Watkins, and if Villa turn it around slightly, about whether I'd consider selling Chris Wood instead of Watkins. And actually, it benefits my team in game week 7 slightly more if I was to do that. So if, let's say I take out Chris Wood to buy Erling Haaland and Mo Salah out in order to buy Semenyo, how much is he? He's up to 7.5 million now. Erling Haaland would get the captaincy armband for me. He might also get the triple captain. So I'd probably bench Rodgers against Fulham and only play Watkins, and finally not have double Aston Villa in my attack. Pedro Porro would come in at home to Wolves, and Senesi would come in away at Leeds. And this is what my team would look like with just 2 free transfers. Now, what I would own on a wildcard that I don't own now, I would probably sell Watkins. I'd probably sell Bruno. I'd probably sell Paqueta. And I probably would have an Arsenal defender away at Newcastle. But I'm not sure that that's definitely better in game week 6. In fact, I actually think the wildcard team would look equal, if not very slightly worse, in game week 6 than my team does now. But the benefit to playing it in game week 6 is saving those 2 transfers and getting slightly ahead of the curve on Arsenal, who I will want probably in game week 7. But I don't feel like this team needs it in game week 6. And I could triple captain Haaland. So if I wildcard in game week 6, I then can't play the triple captain that week. My bench is, fine. My starting 11 does look pretty good. And the reason it would be Watkins that would stay instead of Chris Wood would be going into game week 7, I could play Rodgers over Paqueta. I could play Agbadou in defence. Porro away at Leeds. So that would be another week with a defender going up against Leeds. And in game week 7 is Liverpool going up against Chelsea. And I would be able to have, I've got Sanchez and João Pedro, but this team again looks all right. The big thing it would miss in game week 7 would be Arsenal. But instead of Gyökeres, I've got Watkins at home to Burnley, and I would like a defender. I've got the money in the bank that if I wanted to do Williams to Gabriel, for example, I could do that in game week 7, but I would look to wildcard in game week 8. So I don't know whether I would do the Gabriel transfer or whether I would just roll the transfer into game week 8 and then look to play my wildcard, because I would then still have double Villa before their terrible run of fixtures. Agbadou would probably go. Paqueta I'd decide on. I'd have a few other things, like I'd probably then change Sanchez. Porro would go because their fixtures start to look really bad. from game week sort of 8 onwards. And game week 8 is the next international break, which is always a nice opportunity to play your wildcard. So let's say if I go back to game week 7, let's say I don't do this and I just keep it like this, right? This would be my team in game week 7. Probably roll the transfer. The other benefit is Bruno. I keep Bruno for Sunderland at home. I keep Rodgers and Watkins for Burnley at home, which probably doesn't sound the most sensible thing to do. But I can keep Reinders for Brentford away, and then I can even look to sell him and change him to someone else. So in game week 8, I could sell Bruno, I'd sell Rodgers, I'd sell Watkins, I'd consider what to do with Semenyo, because if you look at Semenyo's next 4 there, Palace, Forest, City, Villa, I definitely would sell Porro, I'd change Agbadu, I'd change Williams. Game week 8 might work slightly better for my team in terms of the wild card compared to game week 6. It's just if I want to get ahead on Arsenal in game week 7 is basically it. Do I save the couple of transfers, buy Arsenal in game week 7? Buy Arsenal on my wild card in game week 6, or do I wait until game week 8? The other benefit, as I said, is Liverpool and Chelsea in game week 8. If I wild card in game week 6, I probably wouldn't have much Liverpool. And I would probably have double Chelsea. But if I wildcard in game week 8, I probably would go at least 1 Liverpool, probably Van Dijk, so maybe double. And I would probably go triple Chelsea. Whereas I'd move off Reinders, for an example. I'd move off Porro. Whereas I can keep Porro for Leeds. So I think game week 6, I don't think game week 7 really worked for my team. I think it would either be game week 6 or game week 8 in terms of wildcard. In terms of what I'm favoring now, I would say probably 60-70%. I think game week 8 is slightly better, but it's just getting aboard on the early price rises, and maybe I'm just being stubborn and maybe I should just play it in game week 6. So I haven't fully decided. So let me know as well. Like I've asked you to let me know things in the comments, and we've got too many comments to leave. So if you want to let me know whether you'd bench boost this week and whether you'd wildcard 6 or wildcard 8, then let me know. I'm not going to wildcard this week, and I'm not going to wildcard in 7. It's just whether game week 6 or game week 8 looks better for my team. And I actually wonder if game week 8 does, and it's also the international break, which is a nice time to wildcard, but I might just want to get it out of the way because I've got enough players. And if Villa look bad again this week and then they walk into Fulham, if Bruno Fernandes disappoints again, I probably will just play it in game week 6. But there is another window for me in game week 8, which might look slightly better. Anyway, I'm going to stop the ramblings there. The team for this week will look like it does here. It's just whether, game week 5, it's just whether I play the bench boost with Dubravka, Reinders, Porro, and Senesi, or save it to play after my wildcard in either game week 6 or game week 8. We're going to wrap it up there. If you've got questions, the complete guide video will be out on Friday afternoon. So I'm taking your videos and your comments that you're leaving on all the videos throughout the week to hopefully answer that all in the complete guide. Some of you have asked for a free hit draft as well as an updated wildcard draft with Cole Palmer in. Both of those things will be included in that complete guide video on Friday. I'm reading all your comments. Some of them saying I'm not doing very well, but I'm doing my best. Hopefully we can turn it around with that wildcard over the next couple of weeks. Anyway, we'll wrap it up there. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Enjoy all the Champions League football if you are watching it. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back again very soon.